Hello friends, welcome to story time. I'm trying to make sure that this is actually working. I always get nervous that it's not gonna work, but it looks like we're doing all right. So, yes, welcome to story time. It is a Wednesday, which means that it is my favorite day of the week, Wellness Wednesday, with our at-home posts. Today we're actually focusing on parents. So typically our posts are for students, and today I just decided to take a little bit of a break from that and focus on our parents' mental health. And so if you are a parent, I definitely encourage you to stay tuned just for this little bit and then log off. But if you check out the post, I mentioned something about how, we're exhausted, as church leaders. We are just plain exhausted, and, we can't even imagine how tired parents are right now, just trying to figure out, since March, trying to figure out what their kids are going to do at home, how school's going to work, what they're going to do for the summer. Parents who are trying to work, or parents who have had to stop working so they could take care of their kids, and that's a lot. And now with school coming up and not fully knowing what is going to happen, my hometown just got word that all schools are doing distance learning, and so no schools will be in person, and so I imagine that's going to be a wave of what we see across at least the West Coast, and so that's a major hit on parents. And so taking the time, always taking the time for yourself. And I know that sometimes that's just not possible within our homes, that you have so much on your plate that you literally cannot take the time out of your day to do self-care. And so the post for today focuses a lot on how to do self-care as a family. So different ways that you and your family can engage in those things together. You can do physical self-care, mental, spiritual, practical things that can all be done inside or outside safely, so that you are getting the rest that you need, but your kids are also getting the rest that you need. And so make sure that you check out that post. Parents and students alike, please feel free to reach out to me if you need some more ideas, or if you just need somebody to talk to and you feel like you don't have anybody. I am all ears. So take care of yourself, parents, because you are working so hard, and we see that, and we want to recognize that. And so I did say, if we could take your kids for the day and just allow you to just be yourself, to just take care of yourself, we 100% would. But we also recognize that that's just not a possibility right now. And so, we'll offer the next best thing that we can, and try to figure out how to take care of ourselves together. So check that out. Check out some of those ideas. They sound pretty awesome, and I can't wait to do them with my family. So that will be awesome. Let's see. Also, just so I don't forget to mention this, we are having a drive-in service on Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, on the 26th, and we are going to be doing communion again. So if that is something that you are interested in, make sure that you check your email, because Christina has sent out an email to everybody that's on our mailing list with all of the information for the drive-in, as well as instructions for getting your communion elements. If you didn't get that email, it probably means that you're not on our mailing list. So send a message to the office, or call the office and get yourself on that list, so that you guys can keep up with what we are doing. So that is at regular time, 10:30. We will still be streaming it, so if you're out of town or you just can't make it to the drive-in service, don't worry, we will still stream it. So I think we got some of the kinks figured out for how to do that well. But Anywho. All right, friends. Well, we are in chapter 8 of our book today. And so we're just kind of chugging right along. And we left off yesterday with Sabrina and Daphne going to the jail. And they're getting ready to break out Jack the Giant Killer, or Giant Slayer, I guess is his name, from prison so that he can help them find Granny and Mr. Canis. So, all right, here we go. Let's get started. Sabrina gasped. Oops, hold on one second. All right. Okay. Sabrina gasped. You want us to help you break out of prison? Jack nodded his head. Quite right. How are we supposed to do that? Sabrina asked. Easy. You go in through the front door and distract the guard. Then the little one here will hit him in the gob with a club or something and snatch his keys. I'm 7 years old. I can't hit someone with a club, and not in the gob, whatever that is, Daphne cried. Sure you can. Deputy Crane isn't going to put up a fight. He's daft in the head and as jumpy as a flea. But if he does happen to put up a fight, all you have to do is hit him in the shins. He'll fall over like a sack of potatoes, Jack replied. She's not hitting anyone with a club, Sabrina said. Well, if saving your granny and her pal isn't that important to you, I can just stay in the nick. Sabrina looked into Jack's hopeful face. How could this odd little man actually be the key to Granny and Mr. Canis' survival? It just didn't seem possible. But on the other hand, the note that Granny had left told them that the mirror would have all the answers that they needed. After 2 days of disbelieving everything that the old woman had told her, Sabrina didn't feel like being proven wrong again, especially when so much was riding on the outcome. So, girls, what's it going to be? If I could do it myself, I would have done it already, but the Bobby took my lock-picking kit when he put the cuffs on me. Smart on his part, too. There isn't a door Jack can't open. You say there's only one deputy? Yes, Jack insisted. And he happens to be Ichabod Crane, the guy from the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Not so much a legend as a true story, but yes. We'll get you out of here, but we're going to do it my way, Sabrina declared. No one is going to get hurt. Deal? Jack frowned, but thrust his hand out on the window. He shook Sabrina's and smiled. So, boss, what's the plan? First, I'm going to need your shirt. When Sabrina opened the front door to the police station, her heart was pounding, faster than it had ever pounded. They were taking a huge chance, especially with Sheriff Hampstead and his deputies searching for them. By now, Crane had to know the girls were on the loose. 2 kids dressed in bright orange monkey sweatshirts flying around on a magic carpet with a 200-pound Great Dane weren't going to be too hard to spot. On the upside, what they were about to do was the sneakiest thing the girls had ever tried. It was nice to be challenged every once in a while. When the door swung open, Sabrina half expected to find Hampstead, Borman, and Swinehart waiting for them, but luckily the station was empty except for a tall, painfully thin man with a gigantic hooked nose, thin lips, and an Adam's apple that bobbed up and down. Ichabod Crane looked just like the story had described him, and he was fast asleep, sitting in a chair with his feet propped up on his desk. Sabrina found the light switch and flipped it off. Drowning the room in murkiness, she gestured behind her, and the carpet drifted in, hovering 2 feet off the ground and carrying its own headless horseman, Daphne, sitting on Elvis's back and wearing Jack's shirt so that her head was hidden inside. He's going to figure this out, Daphne whispered. It's our only shot, Sabrina replied. She crouched down behind an empty desk and cupped her hands around her mouth. She used her feet to kick the door shut, and it slammed so loudly the poor man fell backward over his chair. Once he was on his hands and knees, he rubbed his eyes and looked around in the dark. Hey, who turned out the lights? He called in a whiny, high-pitched voice. Crane, Sabrina moaned in the deepest voice she could produce. The carpet slowly drifted across the room, carrying its headless passenger. You, the deputy cried in horror. You're supposed to be gone. I have returned, Sabrina croaked. The dark room was creating a very believable nightmare. Crane scurried around the room, hiding behind desks and chairs the best that he could. Crane, you cannot hide from me. I am the Headless Horseman. I see all. The deputy screamed and continued to crawl, but the carpet hunted him slowly around the room. I'm a law enforcement officer now, Crane shouted, trying to muster all of his courage. A defender of the peace? I can arrest you for riding a horse without a head. That's a serious crime in this town, he cried. Your laws mean nothing to me. I've come for something, Crane, and I will have it, Sabrina bellowed. What do you want? The deputy cried. Your head, Sabrina groaned. Crane burst into tears. No, please, not my head, he begged. Very well, if not your head, I'll take something else. Anything, whatever you want. I want the keys to the jail. Crane was silent for several moments. Why do you want the keys? Would you prefer that I take your head instead? Sabrina moaned, just as an unlucky bounce of the carpet knocked Daphne off Elvis's back. She fell to the ground, knocking a trash can into a radiator. The sound couldn't have been more appropriate, but Daphne was down for the count. Unable to see, she flailed in her costume, causing more commotion and sending a computer crashing to the floor. Crane, who seemed to think this was part of the Headless Horseman's attack, shouted, Here, the keys! And tossed them to Daphne's feet. Now go, or I will change my mind, Sabrina said. Crane leaped to his feet and ran, not noticing Sabrina as he rushed out of the station door. Once she was sure that he was gone, Sabrina stood up and turned on the lights. Daphne was still rolling around, unable to see anything. Get me out of this, the little girl cried. Sabrina unhooked the top buttons and Daphne's head popped out. Elvis, who had stepped off the carpet, was ready to lick her face. You were very convincing, Sabrina laughed as she helped her sister to her feet. Daphne reached down and scooped up the keys. Let's get him out of here. Sabrina rolled up the carpet, flung it over her shoulder, and the two girls raced to find Jack's cell. Down a long hallway at the back of the building were two jail cells. The one on the left was empty, but the one on the right held Jack. He stood with his arms reaching through the bars as the girls entered the room. Give me the keys, he pleaded, but before they could, Elvis lunged angrily at the cell, growling and barking wildly. The big dog sniffed and snarled at Jack. Elvis, it's okay, he's a friend, Daphne said, which seemed to calm the dog down, but still his nose was stiffing and at full alert. Sabrina handed Jack the keys and sorted through them. Corking! I told you it would work, he bragged. He found the right key, stuck it in the lock, and turned it from the inside. The door clicked and he pushed open. Crane ran like he had seen the devil himself, Sabrina said proudly. I've seen the devil and you're not him, a voice said from down the hallway. Sabrina turned and found Deputy Crane standing in the doorway, blocking their exit. He was so angry that he was shaking. Listen, Crane, just let us pass and no one will get hurt, Jack said. Get back in your cell, Jack, the deputy ordered, pulling his billy club from its strap and swinging it threateningly. Sorry, Itchy, I wish I could help you, but I've just been hired for a rescue mission. Now, Are you going to let us pass, or are we going to have to get rough? Jack threatened. Daphne grabbed his undershirt and yanked on it. You promised nobody gets hurt. Jack scowled. I wouldn't hurt him. Badly, he said. Do your worst, Crane stammered as he backed up a step. Crane, I mean it. I am not staying in this gel. Bring it up, you washed-up has-been. Jack laughed. That's what I am? A washed-up has-been? I'd watch what you say, Itchy. Things can change in the blink of an eye. Not in Fairyport Landing, Jack. The two stared at each other for a long time. Sabrina could almost feel the heat and rage in their eyes. Carpet, let's wrap this up, Jack commanded, and the carpet lifted off Sabrina's shoulder. It darted down the hallway and, like an anaconda, wrapped Crane inside it. He fumbled and fought but couldn't break free. Jack walked over to the rug and patted it lightly. Nothing personal, Itchy, but destiny awaits, he said. He grabbed an end of the carpet and pulled it roughly, causing Crane to spin away like a top. After several rotations, the skinny man collapsed to the floor, overcome by dizziness. Jack set the carpet on the floor and stepped onto it. All right, ladies, he said as he extended his hand to help the girls onto the rug. Elvis rushed to join them and stood like a guard between the girls and Jack. Carpet up, Sabrina said, and it rose to a few feet and then sank slowly back down like a balloon with a hole in it. Why aren't we going up? Sabrina cried. We must be too heavy, Jack groaned. Can we lose the hound? Elvis answered him with a threatening snarl. Very well, Carpet, take us to the Grimm house. Though it was weighed down, the carpet didn't lack any of its speed. It zipped along 3 feet off the floor, down the hallway, through the main room and out the front door of the police station. It sailed across the parking lot and made a left onto the street, causing a pickup truck to screech to a stop. As they passed, the girls waved a friendly, sorry gesture to the bewildered driver. That was almost too easy, Jack said. But no sooner had he puffed out his chest than the sound of a police siren wailed in their ears. A moment later, a police car turned the corner and raced in the group's direction. Ichabod Crane was behind the wheel. Tenacious, isn't he? Jack said. Tenacious? Daphne asked. It means persistent, Sabrina said. And what does persistent mean? Daphne asked. Oh, excuse me. It means he's not going to give up. And I wouldn't have it any other way, Jack assured them. Carpet faster! Close behind, Crane turned on his squad car's flashing lights. Is this the best idea? Sabrina shouted, holding on to an end of the carpet as they sailed between cars and ran through a red light. We're attracting a lot of attention. It's about time this little burg saw some action, Jack cried out happily. Fairyport Landing, you haven't seen anything yet. Sabrina heard a horrible crunching sound behind them and turned back to see what could have made such a loud noise. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. The road behind them began to rise like a massive wave rolling in from the ocean. It was followed by another horrible crunching sound. What's happening? She cried as she watched parked cars get tossed aside like toys. We're in luck, ladies, Jack said. We've already found our giant. Suddenly, a giant foot planted itself in the middle of Main Street. The impact caused windows in nearby businesses to shatter. The ground exploded and a gas main underneath the street burst, shooting flames high into the air. What do we do? Daphne said. We have 2 choices. Stand and fight and die a horrible, messy death, or run, Jack said. Carpet, get us out of here, Sabrina shouted, and the little rug jumped to speed. Unfortunately, the giant was not discouraged by how fast the group was making its getaway. A single stride put the monster right behind them, even when the rug increased its speed again. And with every step the big monster took, the pavement crumbled beneath him. Electrical wires snapped, spraying sparks everywhere. The few drivers on the road at that early hour, lost control of their cars and crashed into buildings. Jack turned to see the chaos, and a broad grin came to his face. "Finally, this is getting interesting," he laughed. The carpet took a sharp turn left, and Sabrina felt lucky that she hadn't tumbled off when she noticed that Daphne was no longer sitting next to her. In fact, Daphne was hanging from the back of the carpet, holding on desperately with both hands. "Jack!" Sabrina cried. The spiky-haired legend reached down and grabbed the little girl by the back of her sweatshirt and pulled her onto the carpet. "Blimey, this is better than a roller coaster," Jack laughed as he sat the girl safely on the carpet. Daphne hugged her sister. It was the first time Sabrina had ever felt her sister shake from fear. She did not like it. "We're going to get ourselves killed," she shouted as the carpet narrowly missed being crushed by a delivery truck filled with chickens. "Nonsense, we can't die like this. We're immortal," Jack replied. "You're immortal. We're not. We have to get off this road," Sabrina demanded. "I see. Must be quite a pain to be human. But the carpet picks the route." Just then, an 18-wheeler pulled directly into their path and stopped. "Carpet, up!" everyone shouted. The carpet slowly rose, sputtering as if it were the little train that couldn't. "We're not going to make it," Sabrina shouted. "Lie down flat," Jack commanded. "You can't mean what I think you mean." Jack nodded, and the two girls reluctantly lay on their backs. "Elvis, play dead," Daphne said, and the dog lay on his side. The little girl turned a worried face to her sister. "He's not going to do what I think he is he?" "Carpet, down!" Jack shouted, and the carpet fell from the sky as it was literally skidding across the pavement. Its momentum carried the group underneath the truck to the other side and down the street. When they sat up again, the young man was already laughing, until he looked up and saw the street cleaner barreling towards them. "Carpet, up!" they all shouted, and the little rug struggled higher, narrowly missing the boiling hot water and sharp bristles the machine used to scour the street. The carpet continued to rise until it had cleared the vehicle. Sabrina sat up and turned around. Ichabod Crane was out of his car, angrily ordering the owners of the 18-wheeler and the street cleaner to move. Unfortunately, the traffic problems did little to stop the giant. Its monstrous foot soared high above the commotion and landed only yards from the carpet. "That thing is going to kill somebody!" Sabrina shouted. "Carpet, we have to get away from the main road!" The carpet made an abrupt turn towards Ferryport Landing's farm community. The giant followed closely behind, and the little rug dodged each deadly footfall. Several times the ugly brute reached out to squash the group with his hands, but each time the carpet zipped out of reach. He grunted and roared at them, but eventually became exhausted by the chase and gave up, shaking his fist into the air and roaring with frustration. "Don't cry, big boy," Jack shouted to the giant as he disappeared behind them on the horizon. "You'll be seeing me again very soon." As the magic carpet coasted up the driveway, it was barely 6 inches off the ground and had lost all of its kick. When the group finally stepped off of it, the beautiful little rug dropped to the ground and rolled itself up, just as it had been delivered to the girls. Daphne leaned over and picked it up gingerly, the way one would a tired kitten, and cradled it in her arms. "Poor thing is all worn out," she said, cooing. Sabrina looked towards the forest. Hampstead's squad cars were still perched in the tall trees behind the house, but he and his men were nowhere to be seen. Reaching into her pocket, Sabrina removed Granny Relda's enormous key and began the tedious job of unlocking all the bolts. Jack watched attentively until she had unlocked every one. Before Sabrina could say the magic words that gained them interest, Daphne pulled her aside, cupped her hand over her big sister's ear, and whispered, "Should we let him in?" It was a fair question. Every time they had broken one of Granny Relda's rules, they had regretted it, but they were in a tough situation. Jack was probably the only person in the world who could confront a giant, and he had offered to help. "I don't think we have much of a choice," Sabrina whispered back. She made a fist and knocked on the door. "We're home." Jack cocked an eyebrow in confusion. "Family tradition," Sabrina said in hopes of throwing him off. "Granny does it, and it makes Daphne laugh, so I picked it up too." Daphne faked a laugh. Jack shrugged. "Whatever." "What's he doing here?" Puck said as he floated down from the sky. Jack turned around and eyed the flying boy, whose huge wings flapped hard to allow him to hover over them. "He's offered to help," Daphne explained, but this time her diplomacy was falling on deaf ears. "Help us do what? Try on some big pants?" Puck sneered, taking a jab at Jack's recent job. "You weren't supposed to bring him back." "Listen, you little brat, I'm the only thing you've got," Jack replied. "2 little girls and a garden gnome aren't going to stop a giant." "Who are you calling a garden gnome?" Puck said, pulling his flute from his sweatshirt. "My royal army knows how to deal with insolent peasants." "Boys," Sabrina and Daphne cried in unison, "that's enough!" Puck and Jack backed off. The girls looked at each other. Apparently, there was a bit of Granny in them both. "What happened to Hampstead and his deputies?" Sabrina asked. "Charming came by and picked them up," Puck said, staring a hole into Jack. "I sat up on the roof and watched him scream at them for half an hour. It was hilarious." "Good. We could use a break," Sabrina said, turning and opening the front door. Elvis rushed past her and into the kitchen, returning a moment later with Granny Relda's handbag. He dropped it at the girl's feet and began to snarl at it. The girls ignored him. Daphne headed into the living room, set the carpet tenderly on the floor, and plopped down, exhausted, into the chair. She pulled a book out from underneath the cushion she was sitting on and tossed it aside. "So, this is the famous Grimm house," Jack said as he wandered from room to room, lifting up photographs and snooping around. "Oh, I wish I had my camera with me. No one will believe that I was actually inside." "Make yourself at home, please," Sabrina said. If Jack heard the sarcasm in her voice, he pretended not to and continued his snooping. "So, girls, where can I take a kit?" he asked. Daphne looked at Sabrina for a definition, but Sabrina shook her head. "I have no idea what that means. You know, hit the sack," Jack said. "You want to take a nap? I'm zonked. We didn't break you out of jail so you could camp out in our house. Kids, I was on a lumpy jail cot all night. I need to get some rest, and besides, my big plan can't go into effect until tomorrow night anyways." "What big plan?" "Right now, it's best that we don't discuss it." Jack fell onto the couch and stretched his arms behind his head. "He doesn't have a plan," Puck snapped. "Yes, I do," Jack replied. "We'll talk about it later. I just need a couple of hours of shut-eye." He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Puck looked at the girls, turned, and stomped outside, slamming the door behind him. "What do we do now?" Daphne said sleepily. "I suppose we might as well get some rest too," Sabrina said, seeing her sister's head bob. She scooped her grandmother's handbag off the floor and set it on the table, then gently urged Daphne out of her chair. Elvis whined at the girls. Sabrina turned and whispered into the dog's ear, "Elvis, keep an eye on Jack." The dog's eyes reflected an understanding, and he seated himself like a stone guardian, watching the sleeping man. The 2 girls went up to their bedroom. It had been a long day. Sabrina didn't remember falling asleep, but when she woke up, she was still in her clothes, and it was already 9 o'clock in the morning. She crawled out of bed, leaving her snoring sister alone, and walked down the hallway. She heard a sound from Granny Relda's room and decided to investigate. But when she opened the door, no one was there. She stepped inside and noticed a framed photo on the old woman's dresser. It was of Granny and Grandpa hugging happily under an apple tree. As usual, Mr. Canis was standing nearby. His face seemed slightly out of focus, and the camera flash had turned his eyes a bright blue color. Sabrina reached into her pocket and pulled out the photo she had found in Granny Relda's handbag. Comparing the two, she found the same odd effect over Mr. Canis. Sabrina was surprised that she hadn't noticed it before. "What are you doing in here?" Puck's voice asked. It startled Sabrina, and she dropped both the picture and the framed photo on the ground. Luckily, the glass didn't break. Sabrina looked around the room, searching for the boy, but didn't see him. "Where are you?" "Up here, ugly," said Puck. Sabrina looked up and nearly screamed. A housefly the size of Elvis was sitting upside down on the ceiling above her. But its enormous size wasn't nearly as disturbing as its human head, which had shaggy blonde hair, a gold crown, and a mischievous grin. Apparently, Puck had a whole bag of disturbing tricks. "What are you doing in here?" Sabrina demanded. It's the only quiet room in the house," Puck replied. "Besides, I know you and Jack have got your big plans, wouldn't want to get in the way." "Could you come down here?" Puck suddenly morphed back into his human form and fell clumsily to the bed below. "You're being a baby," Sabrina said. "Jack wants to help, and you can't stand not being the center of attention." "Whatever," the boy replied. "But when he gets you into trouble, don't be angry when I remind you that I told you so." "You got a better plan? Then let's hear it, because all I've heard from you is the never-ending buzz of your flapping lips," Sabrina snapped. "My parents ran out on me and Daphne almost 2 years ago. We've been through the ringer and have been bounced around for far too long. I admit that when we met Granny Relda, I didn't want anything to do with her, but now that I know she's the real deal, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get her back. I've lost one family, I'm not losing another, so if you have a better idea, then I'm all ears." "Don't look at me," Puck said. "I've made no promises to the old lady. She knew I wasn't a good little boy when we met." Sabrina was taken aback by his insensitivity. "So you couldn't care less what happened to her?" "I've learned one thing in this life of mine. Look out for yourself. Everyone else will just end up disappointing you." "So you won't help?" "I'm not one of the good guys," Puck said. Suddenly, the sound of Elvis's barking filled the room. Sabrina peered into the hallway. There, she saw Jack fighting with Elvis, who was shredding the man's pants in his angry teeth. "Get this beast away from me! He's rabid!" Jack begged. "What are you doing up here?" Sabrina asked suspiciously. "I was coming to wake you." Daphne entered the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's going on?" "The giant killer is prowling around the house looking for something to steal," Puck said. "Your savior has sticky fingers." "Shut your mouth, you dirty little hooligan," Jack shouted. "It'll take more than words to make that happen, you thieving barn rat." "Elvis," Daphne said as she patted the angry dog on the head. Her touch seemed to have a calming effect on him. "Take a chill pill." Elvis released Jack's leg from his teeth. "Thank you," Jack said, eyeing the mangled trousers. "So, are you ready to hear my plan?" Sabrina looked at Puck, hoping the boy might reconsider and help them, but he sneered and looked away. "Yes, we're ready," she replied. Puck said nothing. He walked down the stairs and out the door, slamming it behind him. "We don't need him anyway," Jack said. "Is anyone hungry? Let's have some breakfast." He rushed down the stairs and into the kitchen, the girls following behind. They watched as he rifled through the contents of the refrigerator. "There's nothing to eat in this house," Jack complained. "I could really go for some Bubble and Squeak or some Bangers. Do you kids think you could cook up some steak and kidney pie for me?" The girls stared. "I hear noises coming from his mouth, but they don't sound like words," Daphne said. "Maybe he's having some kind of fit," Sabrina said. Jack rolled his eyes, snatched up some leftovers, and ate greedily. "Let me tell you, kids," he said, his mouth full. "Prison food is terrible." We'll take your word for it, Sabrina said. While Jack ate, the girls took turns telling him how Granny Relda and Mr. Canis had been kidnapped. Sabrina told him her theory about Mayor Charming being the mysterious Mr. Englishman and how she thought he was using the giant to scare people off their land. So, tell us your plan, Daphne said as Jack finished his breakfast. I'm still working out the details. Both girls flashed Jack an angry look. Don't worry, he said defensively. It's going to be brilliant. Sabrina had had enough. She got up from her seat and grabbed the telephone. We helped you escape from prison so you could help us save our grandmother, and all you've done is eat our food and drool on our sofa, she raged. If you can't do it, then I'm just going to call Deputy Crane and tell him, or let him know that you're ready to go back. Put the phone down and relax, Jack said calmly as he helped himself to another chicken leg. You think tracking down a giant is easy? Giants have survived thousands of years, being as big as they are, and they've learned a few things about staying out of sight when they need to. Now, we can traipse through the woods, cut down the forest, and drag the Hudson River, but the fact is that if a giant doesn't want to be found, he's not going to be found. You're talking in circles, Sabrina complained. What I'm saying, Duck, is that we have to be smarter than a giant to catch a giant. You said it yourself, that the mayor was trying to cover up what happened to that farm. It's no secret that he wants to buy up the entire town. What a better way than to get a giant to scare off the landowners who won't sell. So when your family started snooping around, he sent the big boy after you. He's got your granny, and now he's after the two of you. All the evidence you need was chasing us down Main Street yesterday. Go on, Sabrina said as she set the phone back in its cradle. Knowing Charming, he's got a map of Ferryport Landing in his office with all the property he's after and where he's going to send the giant next. All you have to do is sneak into his office during the ball tonight, find the map, and see where the giant's next target is. Then we show up, the giant shows up, I know what to do, and bingo bango, we kill the big boy and save your grandmom. That's your big plan? Sabrina cried. You got something better? I know that sneaking into the ball doesn't sound exciting as burning down the forest and waiting for a giant to run out, but I've always had a mind that tells me the easiest way is the best way. There's one big problem, though, Daphne spoke up. The mayor and the police are looking for us. We're going to have a tough time sneaking into the place. Oh, girls, you're going to go right through the front door and no one is even going to notice, Jack said confidently. After he had eaten, he insisted the best way to digest a meal was to follow it with another kip. As their hero rested, the girls frantically searched the books for anything that might help. Eventually they came upon one of their grandfather Basil's many journals. Inside, he had sketched out a rough plan of Charming's estate. The mayor's mansion was a sprawling several-story palace with dozens of rooms. Their grandpa had given estimates of room sizes, locations of various windows, and even an indication of a wall he believed held a secret door. But Grandpa hadn't seen all of the house, and many parts of the drawing were labeled with question marks. Sabrina noticed he had paid extra attention to possible escape routes. Apparently, Grandpa had been a bit of a sneak as well. Sabrina carefully studied the map and did her best to commit it to memory. When Jack finally woke up several hours later, he found the girls ready to get started. The first thing we need is the magic mirror, Jack said. I don't know what you're talking about, Sabrina said, stealing a look into Daphne's eyes. Girls, I know that Relda has the magic mirror. Everyone knows that. Why do you think the front door has a dozen locks on it? Sabrina took the keys out of her pocket and led her sister and their guest up the steps. Once they arrived at the mirror's room, she inserted the key and unlocked the door. As before, the face in the mirror was filled with rage at the invasion. Who dares? He bellows. Jack strolled in without a care, followed by the girls. Turn off the drama mirror, he scoffed. Oh, it's you, Mira mumbled. Of course it's me. I'm the bloke you call when you have a big problem, and these girls have a really big problem, Jack bragged. And where is the carpet? The face in the mirror asked Sabrina. Sorry, she said. She walked to the doorway and called for it. After a couple of minutes, the carpet floated limply into the room. What have you done to it? Mira cried as the carpet fell to the floor and once again rolled itself up. I think we had too many people on it, Daphne explained as a hand broke the surface of the mirror and then snatched up the carpet from the ground. It's nearly unraveling in my hand, the face wailed as he babied the rug. Poor little carpet, look at how they treated you. Too many years hanging on that wall in the Grimm house has made you a real sourpuss, Jack commented. How can I help you? Mira asked, brushing off the insult. We need to sneak into Charming's mansion tonight, and we need some disguises, Jack said. Not a problem at all. And we need the slippers. Mira frowned. Absolutely not, he stammered. Listen, this house is going to be surrounded with the police at any minute now. Alibaba's carpet isn't going to get us into Charming's mansion. We need the slippers, Jack argued. Mrs. Grimm would not approve. The slippers were entrusted to this family so they would never fall into the wrong hands, Mira replied. You can trust me, Jack said. Didn't you used to have your own magic items? What happened to the Cloak of Darkness? I lost it in a game of poker. You lost a cloak that turns you invisible in a poker game? What about the Shoes of Swiftness? I hawked 'em. The Cap of Knowledge? The goose that laid the golden egg? Lost the cap in a game of dice, and I accidentally left the window open one day and the goose flew off. I suppose you sold the Sword of Sharpness? Mira grumbled. No, I still have the Sword of Sharpness, said Jack indignantly. I just misplaced it. It's in my flat somewhere. The point is, we need the slippers. If you won't let me have them, then let one of the girls wear the shoes. It doesn't make any difference to me. What slippers? Sabrina shouted. She was tired of their bickering. Dorothy's slippers, Jack and Mira shouted. Dorothy? From the Wizard of Oz? Daphne exclaimed. Yes, Jack said impatiently. They can transport you anywhere you want to go. All you have to do is click 3 times, Daphne said. Give me the slippers. Girls, I have to warn you. The slippers are very powerful magic. People have died trying to get to them. There are still some in this town, who would slit your throats to possess them, Mira said. Enough of this, Jack said, and then did something that shocked Sabrina. He stepped into the reflection and pushed the man in the mirror aside. How dare you? Mira shouted. Come on, kids, keep up, Jack said as his face appeared in the reflection. The girls were unsure of what to do. Daphne reached up and curled her hand into her sister's. Sabrina squeezed softly, and the two of them took a tentative step through the mirror. It was a cool sensation, almost as if they had been caught in a summer rainstorm, and when they finally opened their eyes, a brilliant, gleaming light flooded their pupils. What they saw made Sabrina queasy. It wasn't natural. It just wasn't possible. Sabrina had expected to walk into a reflection of the room they had been in. After all, the mirror was a mirror. But she couldn't have been more wrong. Instead, she found herself in a long, wide hallway that reminded her of Grand Central Station. It was vast, with a vaulted ceiling and endless archways of glass and steel. Glowing marble columns held up the ceiling, which rose hundreds of feet above them. Breathtaking sculptures of men and monsters lined the hall, and along each wall were hundreds of doors, all shapes and sizes, and some no bigger than a rabbit, others 100 feet high. Some were wooden, others steel, and still others seemed to be made from pure light. Sabrina looked down at Granny Relda's keyring and realized what all of the keys were for. Yet another of Granny's eccentricities had a legitimate explanation. Even more startling than the gigantic room that they were standing in was the man who lived in it. The face in the mirror was no longer a disembodied head, but a short, chubby little man in a black suit and tie. "Keep your hands in your pockets, Jack," the man insisted. "Mirror, I am shocked." "Don't you trust me?" Jack said. "I trust you about as much as the person who gave you that fat lip," said Mirror. "What is this place?" "It's an arcane-powered, multiphasic, trans-dimensional pocket universe," Mirror replied. "A what who?" "Your grandmother calls it the world's biggest walk-in closet," the little man sighed. "It's sort of a holding area for dangerous and valuable items. I call it the Hall of Wonders, and you're not supposed to be in here." "Oh, Mirror," Jack said. "We've learned one of your secrets. Don't worry, I'm sure you have a million more." The little man's face flushed with anger. His fists clenched and looked as if he might hit Jack, but the giant killer just ignored him. "All right, Mirror, where are the slippers?" Jack asked impatiently. "This way," Mirror said, gesturing for them to follow. He walked down the long hall past many doors. The plaque on one read Fairy Godmother Wands, while the next read Talking Plants. As they continued down the hallway, they found more doors labeled Poisonous Fruits, Dragon Eggs, Impossible Animals, Wishing Wells, Crystal Balls, Cursed Treasure, Scrolls, and Prophecies, and on and on and on. Passing one massive door, the group jumped as violent pounding from within threatened to knock it off its hinges. Something on the other side wanted out, something named Grendel. The group pressed on down the hallway, where they finally stopped at the door that read Magic Shoes. "Here we are," Mirror said reluctantly. "But I must once again remind you that magic is dangerous. There's a reason why the Ever-Afters asked this family to look after all of these things. Magic in the wrong hands only leads to chaos." "We'll be careful," said Sabrina as she knelt down to the lock. It was a simple one that would take a skeleton key, but Granny's keyring had dozens of skeleton keys. Sabrina tried the first one, and it failed. She tried another, still nothing. "Let me try," Jack said impatiently. "I've got it," Sabrina snapped. She turned another key, and this time the lock opened. The door swung wide, and everyone entered. The room was simple, but its contents were amazing. Along the walls were hundreds of pairs of shoes, cowboy boots, woven sandals, wooden clogs, leather moccasins, and many more, all displayed on wooden shelves. Some of the shoes seemed if they had been made for animals, while others were big enough for the entire group to stand in. One golden pair had downy white wings that flapped as if the shoes were alive, and another glittering pair were made of pure glass. Jack picked up the pair of shoes with wings, but the little man promptly smacked his hand and snatched them from his grip. After replacing the shoes, Mirror crossed the room, picked up a pair of sparkling silver slippers, and handed them to Sabrina. "Try to take better care of these than you did the magic carpet," he said gruffly. If these were the famous ruby slippers, they were more silver than red, though in the light Sabrina saw hints of a warm rosy color. She couldn't figure out what they were made of, but if forced to guess, she would say that they were tinfoil. "Put them on, child," the little man said. "They're way too small," Sabrina said as she eyed the shoes. "One size fits all, duck," Jack said. Sabrina yanked off her sneakers and slid her foot inside one of the slippers, which magically grew in size and fit her foot perfectly. Once she had the other one in, an odd energy crept up her legs and filled her whole body. Just then, Jack darted out of the room and across the hall. "Jack!" the little man shouted after him, but Jack didn't listen. When they finally found him, the giant killer was eyeing a door with a plaque that read Magic Beans. "I can't believe you have a whole room of them," he shouted with glee. We might be bending the rules on the slippers, but those are off limits to the likes of you, Mirror said. How about a peek? Jack pleaded. He suddenly looked like a lost little boy. These things are a part of my past. Can't a man take a walk down memory lane? Sabrina could see his expression, and all at once she felt sorry for him. Jack was a man whom the whole world had loved. He had seen amazing things and lived life to the fullest, and being trapped in Fairyport Landing had put an end to all of it. It dawned on Sabrina that Fairyport Landing might have been the home of many of the world's fairy tale creatures, but it was also a prison that they were never allowed to leave. It just didn't seem right. Sabrina pulled out the keys, knelt down, eyed the keyhole, and within seconds opened the door. Jack pushed past her into the tiny room where a single mason jar sat on a table. Inside it was a collection of little white beans. Jack gasped and picked up the jar. There must be 100 of them. Mirror snatched the jar out of his hand and placed it back on the table. These things are dangerous. If you dropped them on the floor, we'd be ear-deep in giants. Jack scowled for a moment and looked as if he were ready to fight for his treasure. But he took a deep breath, and his anger vanished, only to be replaced with a boyish grin. Thanks, Grims. You don't know what you've done for me, he said. Mirror hurried everyone back through the door. Well, ladies, now that we've got the shoes, we need proper disguises, Jack said. I think a little fairy godmother magic will do the trick. Wands are over here, Mirror said, leading them down the hallway. They stopped at the door labeled Fairy Godmother Wands, and Sabrina unlocked it. Inside, a small black cauldron sat on a tiny table, with several skinny sticks popping out of the top. Mirror reached into the pot and removed the one that had a glittery glass star on the end and handed it to Sabrina. The first magical item that your family ever had to confiscate, Mirror said. I remember old Wilhelm Grimm trying to get that away from her, Jack laughed. Girls, I'll say one thing about your family. They are brave. Fairy godmothers are sweet as pie on the outside, but try to take away their wands, and they get downright mean. Indeed, Mirror said. How does this work? Sabrina asked. Mirror frowned. I cannot believe your father, he cried. I'd hoped that your mother Veronica might at least give you the basics behind his back. Very well, this is the changing wand used by Cinderella's fairy godmother. It will alter your clothes, shoes, and even your bodies, any way you want. Charming's ball is going to be filled with the rafters with ever-afters, Jack said. You're going to go in as one of them. Daphne smiled. I know what I want to be. I want to be the Tin Woodsman. Are you sure, honey? The little man in the mirror asked. 10 is so last season. Daphne nodded enthusiastically. Very well, it's your fashion funeral, he said. Sabrina, just say 10 Woodsmen. Make 3 small circles with the wand and then tap her on the head. Okay, Sabrina said. 10 Woodsmen. She made 3 awkward circles in the air and then smacked her sister on the head with the wand. Daphne squealed in pain and rubbed the spot, but as she was rubbing, a miraculous change began to occur. Her skin took on a silvery tone. She grew several feet taller, and her clothes faded only to be replaced by gears and joints. Her hair retreated to her scalp, and a shiny funnel took its place. Sabrina blinked her eyes to be sure that they weren't playing tricks on her. But she knew they weren't. Her sister had become the Tin Woodsman. That hurt, Daphne cried as her hand scraped against her new metallic head. Hearing the screech of the metal in her ears, she looked at her hand and squealed in delight. She walked around the hall, squeaking with every step. Look at me! Spitting image, Jack said. Daphne took the wand from her sister. Okay, who do you want to be? Sabrina was stumped. She realized she had to choose wisely. She needed to be inconspicuous at the ball. Someone small and unnoticeable, and someone who could be very, very sneaky. Okay, I was thinking, I know, Mama Bear! The little girl interrupted, and before Sabrina could stop her, she had performed 3 circles and was cracking her big sister on the head. Sabrina felt the transformation immediately, as if her body was being inflated. Her clothes disappeared and were replaced with bright pink and white polka-dotted dress that ended well above her knee. She looked down at her humongous arms and groaned as hair exploded from every pore. Fangs burst from the top of her mouth and razor-sharp claws sprang from her fingernails and toes. She could feel them scratching at the insides of the ruby slippers, which had expanded to fit her new size 26 feet. When the transformation was complete, Daphne giggled. "You did that on purpose," Sabrina growled. "You are so cute," Daphne cried, as she threw her metal arms around her sister and gave her a big hug. "I could just eat you." "Well, no one's going to see the two of you coming," Jack moaned, though it was obvious he found the whole thing funny. "Girls, you realize there's a timer in this magic. When the clock strikes 9 o'clock, you're going to change back. Do you understand?" Mirror lectured. 9 o'clock? I thought it was midnight. Cinderella had until midnight, Sabrina argued. Cinderella was 17 years old. You are 11. There's no way your grandmother would approve of you staying out here until the wee hours of the morning. We're trying to save her life, Sabrina pointed out. Still, children should not be allowed out that late. Thus, your magic wears off at 9, Mirror said. That doesn't give us much time. It's 7 o'clock right now, Jack said, eyeing his wristwatch. Mirror took the wand from Daphne and put it back into the pot. He led the group out of the room, closed the door, and when Sabrina couldn't manage, locked it with Granny's keys. One last thing, Jack said. You don't happen to have any walkie-talkies in this place, do you? All right, friends, that is it for today. Tomorrow we'll be in Chapter 9 to figure out how this heist goes down. So make sure to check out our post. Join us tonight for worship and discipleship at 6 o'clock. So I will see you tonight or tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and remember to take care of yourself.